Chilling tales for dark nights.
Want to make sure you never miss a Chilling Tales for Dark Nights video again? Be sure to subscribe and hit that bell to turn on notifications. Good evening, listener. You're listening to Chilling Tales for Dark Nights. I'm your host, Steve Taylor, and tonight I'll be your guide as we traverse the dimly lit corridors of your wildest imaginations. Today's episode is proudly brought to you by Astonishing Legends, the podcast with a mission to take a look at legendary, strange, and unusual events from throughout history and interview people who've had close encounters with the unexplained. Astonishing Legends is available now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Or check out the links in our video description. Now, settle in, get cozy, and prepare to be unsettled. It's time to turn off the lights and turn on the dark.
Chilling tales for dark nights.
All 5 of the tales in today's episode are Chilling Tales for Dark Nights exclusives, brand new and never before heard, and voiced by fan favorite Jason Hill, host of the Horror Hill podcast. If you enjoy what you hear tonight and would like to check out more of Jason's work, be sure to tune in to the launch of the 2nd season of Horror Hill on February 5th, 2020. Wherever podcasts can be found. In our first sinister story tonight, written by author Brian Martinez, we meet a young couple with a fascination for the fearsome who are on a road trip exploring abandoned places. On one of their nightly excursions, they decide to take the path less traveled, a local highway rarely used on account of its morbid history. Will they find what they're looking for? Or more? Stay tuned and find out. Without further ado, I present to you Broken Down Road.
Randy and Julia loved dead things. They craved nothing as much as they did abandoned towns, places built by man and then left to be taken back by nature. Shut down factories and decommissioned prisons were their playgrounds, and they collected ghost stories like some people collect baseball cards. Other couples called them morbid, of course, and their families thought they were crazy, but they never felt as peaceful, never felt as at home, as when they picnicked in a cemetery, or walked hand in hand in a crypt, reading aloud the names of the deceased to each other. So, when it came time to plan a vacation for their 3-year anniversary, it didn't take long to decide on a week-long road trip, an adventure to some of America's forgotten places. Their plan was to start in Pithole City, then drive to Centralia, then on to Penn Hills Resort, with a handful of other stops along the way, culminating in fulfilling their long-time dream of doing a little time at Eastern State Penitentiary. They packed some clothes, loaded up Randy's Oldsmobile, and headed out on their adventure. They'd been driving quietly for the last hour or so, barely seeing another car the entire time, and had fallen into a peaceful silence. Sometime after passing their 3rd state forest, a place where things had the nerve to be alive and boring, Julia was staring out the window at the moonlit highway, daydreaming about one day visiting Highgate Cemetery in London, when something caught her attention. She sat up in the passenger seat and turned to Randy, eyes lit up with excitement. "Did you see that?" "See what?" he asked, glancing at the rearview mirror. "Just trust me and pull over." Randy slowed down and rolled onto the shoulder, careful not to run over the lost hubcap there. "What is it?" he asked, confused by her sudden change in mood. "Have you heard of Broken Down Road?" she asked, not so innocently. Randy scoffed at the odd question. "Of course." "Well," she paused, "I think I saw an exit back there." He looked at his phone mounted to the dashboard. The GPS showed only a straight line indicating the highway they were on. No turns, no exits, not so much as a dot in the road. "That's supposed to be way further south from here," he said. "True, but no one can ever find it, right? Maybe they're looking in the wrong place." He frowned. He'd read the stories about Broken Down Road, which despite its nickname was more of a local highway than a road. 30 years earlier, it had been the site of an accident so deadly that drivers, locals especially, refused to use it anymore, forcing it to be abandoned within 5 years' time. Stories of what happened there grew into myths, replaced by rumors of missing tourists who came seeking the legendary road. Locals allegedly grew so concerned about Broken Down Road that they took matters into their own hands and concealed the entrance, turning the unfindable road into a legend overnight. Randy was skeptical, but he also knew himself. If he didn't take a look now, he would end up going mad, driving up and down the highway, looking for a hidden entrance for the next 10 years. So, he shifted the Oldsmobile into reverse and slowly backed up along the shoulder, running over a few rocks and some strips of torn tire rubber, not stopping until Julia told him to stop. He didn't know how she'd seen it. The trees were so thick, the weeds so overgrown, they were choking each other out. But there, between two sickly elm trees, was a space little more than a car's length. Cracked blacktop branched away from the well-maintained highway leading into the night-heavy woods. "That could be any road," Randy said. Julia smiled, pointing to his phone. Regardless of what road it was unmarked. They looked at one another, not saying a word, until Randy slowly smiled back at her. 10 minutes, he said. "If we don't see a way off, we turn around." "I know the rules, my dear. I made the rules." With another smile and a glance back to make sure no cars were coming, he swung out wide and steered the Oldsmobile into the space between the trees. Dead branches scraped their doors on either side, fingernails dragging on a chalkboard. The beaten-up blacktop was loud under the car's tires, and the headlights barely pierced 20 feet through the darkness. But Randy kept his foot steady on the gas, pushing the car up the slow incline of an overgrown ramp, the oppressive plant life crowding them the entire way. They shared a breathless minute, dried leaves scratching along the Oldsmobile's roof, but at the end of it, they were greeted by a beautiful sight. An empty road stretched into the night, lit by nothing more than the stars and the moon above. "It can't be," Randy said under his breath. Julia reached out and squeezed his leg, barely able to contain her excitement. "One way to find out, right?" "Huh, I guess so," he said, and pressed down on the gas. The road was surprisingly smooth compared to the ramp they'd taken to reach it. The blacktop was in good condition, with only a few cracks and potholes to speak of. Randy was careful to drive around them, maintaining a low speed despite his urge to open up on the road, where no one was there to stop him. Their adventure had taken an exciting, unexpected turn. And yet, something bugged him about the situation. Julia, who'd been taking picture after picture on her phone, felt his hesitation and asked him what was wrong. "How was this so easy to find?" he asked. "I mean, if it is Broken Down Road." Julia thought about it, her phone lowering. "There were some really bad storms around here a few days back. Maybe they uncovered the entrance." "Maybe," he said, still not convinced. And yet the question moved quickly to the back of his mind as he looked around at the treasure they'd uncovered, their hidden playground. The road looked as if it hadn't been visited by a single soul in decades. Not until they'd stumbled across it. There was no divider to speak of, only a faded line at its center, little more than a whisper of white reflected in the car's headlights. An impenetrable wall of trees crowded either side of the road, guarding the road, and them, from sight. "I think there's a river pretty close to here," he said, squinting through the trees. "A hitchhiker drowned in it a while back." As his eyes adjusted further down the road, to a shape just barely visible in the distance, he heard Julia say something. "Well, that's weird. My phone shut off," she mumbled to herself. But Randy couldn't pay attention to her just then, because his focus was outside of the car. Outside, and a bit further down. About 100 yards ahead of them, a man stood perfectly still at the center of the road. As Julia struggled with her phone, trying to get it to turn on again, Randy let his foot off the gas and let the car coast. He wanted to say something to Julia, but he didn't want to scare her. The man in the road remained still, either oblivious to the car or standing in defiance of it. Closer now, Randy could see that the man was facing away from them. He wore a dark suit with red shoes, the collar of his shirt sticking up from the jacket. Only 20 yards away from him now, Randy brought the car to a complete stop. Julia finally looked up from her dead phone. "What are you—" she started saying, but her voice cut out when she saw the man in the road, not moving, not facing them, not doing anything, but blocking their way. "Randy?" she said. "I know." "No? He might need help." "Randy," she repeated, her voice quivering this time. "Look at his feet." He looked, and immediately wished he had not. Randy had thought the man was wearing red shoes, but in fact, he wasn't wearing shoes at all. His feet were bare, no shoes or socks on them. The skin had been shorn clean off, leaving behind a mixture of raw muscle and bloody flesh, pink and white and puddled red. "Call the police," he said quietly. Just as he did, his phone shut off as well. Randy ripped it from its mount and pressed the power button, then gave it an angry shake, but it remained powerless, the screen dark and cold. "You need to get us out of here," Julia said, her body twisted toward him, wide eyes pleading. The surprise stop had taken a bad turn, and their adventure was suddenly no longer fun. They either needed to keep going or turn around. Anything but sit in the middle of an abandoned road and stare at a man with skinless feet. "Where did he go?" Randy asked. Julia snapped forward in her seat, seeing what Randy saw. The man was gone. He'd vanished, leaving behind two perfectly formed footprints in the middle of the road, both painted in dark red blood. A blink later, and those were gone too. Randy felt it before he saw it. The face in the driver's side window, half red, half white, the left side torn clear off. Julia screamed. The sound was deafening in the confined space. Randy fumbled so hard for the gas he missed the pedal, the shoe slipping off, then aimed again and stomped it like he meant to crush it. The car lurched forward, rocketing away from the man with half a face. Julia looked back and shouted something like, "Oh God, he's not alone!" Except Randy barely heard anything but the heartbeat pummeling his eardrums. His knuckles were white as he squeezed the steering wheel and tried to keep control of the car, pushing its old whining engine as hard as it would go. "What the hell was that?" Julia asked, tears choking her vision. I don't know, was all Randy could think to say. He looked in the rear view, then the side view, but saw nothing, except the darkened road slipping past. No bloody footprints, no man with half a face. They tried to calm themselves, come up with a plan. They would drive as long as it took to find the next exit, they decided. No turning back, no slowing down for anything short of a brick wall. Randy wanted to ask what she'd meant by "he's not alone," but decided against it. He caught his breath and checked the time, trying to make sense of it all. The clock in the Oldsmobile's dashboard read 9:26. As he watched, the display dimmed for a moment, blinked all zeros, then returned to normal. He was about to ask Julia if she'd seen it too when the wheel seized in his hands. It felt like someone had grabbed the wheel and was trying to pull it away from him. The car lurched left, then right, as Randy fought for control. He tried to hit the brakes, but the pedal didn't budge under his foot. The car careened down the dark road, the headlights swaying left and right in the night as Randy wrestled with the wheel. He saw the line of trees up ahead, drawing closer every second, and knew in his bones, that whatever he was fighting with wanted them to meet those trees, to impale the car on them. His hands clenched the wheel, arms shaking from using all their strength. He started to think he needed to brace for impact, to prepare for the unavoidable. Before he knew what was happening, Julia took off her seatbelt, reached over, and turned the key in the ignition. With the engine cut, the Oldsmobile coasted along the road, the wheel still pulling them left and right until finally they crawled to a stop at a harsh angle, halfway between the lanes. Randy and Julia watched the steering wheel turn on its own for a few seconds, still trying to make them crash, before finally falling still. Then they looked at each other. Both of them were sweaty and pale, both breathing heavily, both looking as if they were about to throw up. "That was good thinking," he said, and she blinked. "Thanks." "What did you mean back there when you said he wasn't alone?" The car came alive with the sounds of fists pummeling the glass. There was no one around them, no one on any side of the car. And yet it sounded like a crowd was beating the windows and kicking the doors, an angry mob trying to rip them out of the car. Randy checked the door locks as Julia covered her ears, trying to shut out the din of furious smashing and screaming. Randy looked around, assessing their situation. They were trapped. Really trapped. Turning the car on meant crashing. Staying there meant being attacked by an unseen horde. Getting out meant... well, he wasn't about to get out, not anytime soon. Not while the pounding and scratching continued. The best option, the only option, was to wait out the attack. He distantly remembered how he used to like dead things, but that idea seemed about 1,000,000 miles away just then, or however far they'd traveled down broken down road. Then he heard it, the unmistakable crack of glass. "There!" Julia shouted, pointing at the hairline fracture in the rear windshield. As unseen fists continued to beat on the car, the crack grew longer and longer, branching off like arteries until the whole sheet threatened to smash in. Randy stared at Julia, not knowing what to do. "Just go," she said. "Anything is better than here." There was no time to argue. The rear windshield collapsed inward, 1,000,000 bits of safety glass exploding across the rear seats. Randy twisted the key, turning the old engine over on the first try, and floored the gas pedal, getting them the hell out of there. A quick glance at the mirror revealed a swarm of bloody hands being pulled from the missing windshield. He was thrilled to find the steering wheel was completely under his control this time. And Julia was too, as she let out a small, nervous laugh. In no time, they were speeding back down broken down road and away from the things that wanted to be in with them, the night wind whipping through the car from the missing rear windshield. Their hair and clothes flapped and waved as they careened along the long-lost highway. "Do you see an exit?" Julia asked over the sound of the wind assailing them. I think I see something," he said, straining to see in the lightless night. But then he smelled something too. something overpowering, like blood mixed with earth, and before he knew it, the hands were on him. Cold hands covering his eyes, choking him from behind, scratching and pulling at his face. He tried to tear them away, but it was too late. He felt the car leave the highway, tires bouncing on unpaved ground. And then, just for a moment, with fingernails pulling at his eyes, he heard Julia scream. Randy felt the impact in his chest as the seatbelt engaged like a punch to the sternum. Then, his ears were filled with the sound of breaking glass and crunching metal. The world folded in around him. The hands on his face disappeared as quickly as they came, leaving him to gasp for breath as his vision came back, and the car settled into its new, mangled shape. Blinking, shaking his head, Randy studied the passenger seat next to him for some time, trying to make heads or tails of it. So many things had been appearing and disappearing that night. He thought it was another trick of the light, maybe damage to his brain, sustained from the crash. Maybe even the thick smoke exhaling from the dashboard was choking him, making him delirious, because something about the passenger seat didn't make sense. It was empty. Julia was gone. He didn't know whether to trust his own eyes or even his mind. Had she not been with him on the trip? Were his memories of talking with her and being next to her all false? Just more damage from the crash? But there was one sight, one image, that brought everything into instant, painful focus. Her seatbelt. She'd taken it off before the crash. Randy became aware of a cold draft whispering across his face. He turned his sore neck to look at the windshield, at the massive hole in the passenger side. Then he looked through it, through the billowing smoke rising from the car's hood, and to the woods beyond. There, at the foot of a moss-covered pine, Julia lay face up, arms at her sides, as simply as if she were reclined on their couch back home. "Oh, my God," Randy said over and over, clawing his way out of his seatbelt and focusing upon his crumpled door. He ran to her, mumbling prayers the whole way until he collapsed in the dead leaves next to her and shook her. The breath caught in his chest as he prayed and shook, prayed and shook. Slowly, she opened her eyes. It was a miracle, and he laughed. She sat up despite him telling her not to, and she looked around at the woods, then at the highway, as if she'd never seen them before. The smell came again to Randy's nose, the smell of death. Then, he saw the faces in the trees, staring at them, emerging from the shadows of the pines. Even though he knew he shouldn't move someone so soon after an accident, he decided the alternative was much worse. He helped Julia to her feet and brought her up onto the paved road, leaving behind the ruined Oldsmobile. With an arm around her waist, he started walking her down the highway, away from the people coming from the trees and the others in the road, some with missing arms, some with burnt clothes and skin. He didn't know how long it would be until the next exit, but he wasn't going to stop until they reached it. The burnt and bleeding crowd shuffled slowly behind, though he tried not to look at them. After a few minutes of painful walking, Randy heard a sound through the trees on the other side of the highway. It took some time to place it, but soon he realized what it was. The river. The one they talked about earlier. It was close by. Closer than the exit that wouldn't come. And then something kicked in the back of his mind. A tiny thought. A single fact repeated in so many of the million ghost stories he'd read and collected over the years. An ancient, time-tested rule to offer protection from the dead. "Running water," he shouted proudly. "They can't cross it!" He didn't wait for Julia to agree with him. He just grabbed her hand and started running toward the river, weaving between trees and jumping over rocks. Julia kept up, letting herself be pulled toward what might be their only escape. She didn't complain about her injuries or let them slow her down. Before long, they emerged from the other side of trees to find a wide river rushing through the moonlit night. It was swollen from the recent storms, the waters flowing dangerously fast, threatening to carry them or anyone away with one misstep. Randy let go of Julia's hand so he could step in properly before turning back to help her in. The water was frigid, soaking his shoes and pants instantly. "Come on," he called out, breath already shaking. "They're coming!" From the woods, emerging from between the old knotted trees that held back the waterlogged shoreline, broken bodies stepped into the moonlight. A woman, in a faded yellow dress, burnt a little more than charcoal from the waist up. An older man, a truck driver from the look of his clothes, with a horribly broken neck that allowed his bloodied head to flop around. 2 little children, 1 boy and 1 girl, whose shattered bodies barely held them up on blackened legs. Standing in the bitterly cold water, the heat draining from his body, Randy had a thought so strange, so foreign. It was as if it weren't his own, as if he turned into a hidden radio frequency. A code buried in the airwaves. It was the thought that Broken Down Road had been so easy for them to find that night for a reason, because they hadn't found it. Rather, it had found them. It had appeared to them by its own choice, its own volition. The playground, seeking the toys. Body temperature dropping, blood going cold, Randy understood the truth of Broken Down Road. It was always easy to find, when it wanted to be found. He shouted for Julia to get into the water as more and more destroyed people came out of the trees. Julia, beaten up badly from the crash, stood above him in the night, pale and beautiful and his to protect. And yet she didn't move, didn't join him in the freezing cold water. She didn't even look scared anymore, just bloodied and discolored. He looked down at his hand, the one he'd been offering to her, and saw how much of her blood was on it, cold and coagulated. As Randy looked back up and watched the hands reach out for him, Julia among them, her bloodied fingers beckoning him to come back, to join her and the others on land, he suddenly knew the truth, that she couldn't set foot in the river, couldn't even touch it. The dead couldn't cross running water, and soon, neither could he.
I hope you enjoyed Broken Down Road, as written by author Brian Martinez and performed by Jason Hill. Up next, we've got another tale for you. This one, another Chilling Tales for Dark Nights original from author Jeff Sturdivant. In it, we meet Jack, who has recently moved into a cheap apartment in the city and discovered an old suit left behind in the closet. When he approaches his superintendent about the mysterious attire, he's told in no uncertain terms to leave it alone, or else. Before I proceed, however, I'd like to quickly tell you a bit more about tonight's sponsor, Astonishing Legends. If you're looking for in-depth analysis of legendary, strange, and unusual events from throughout history, then you've got to check out the Astonishing Legends podcast. Scott Philbrook and Forrest Burgess have been hosting the Astonishing Legends podcast since 2014 and have accumulated over 67 million listens to date. And that many fans of the fearsome can't be wrong. Astonishing Legends uncovers the truth behind legends you thought you knew by exploring every possible explanation, from the skeptical and mundane to the far edge of the fringe. As a listener, you'll have more information than you ever imagined, and you'll get the opportunity to decide for yourself whether the stories at the root of these mysteries are nothing more than old wives' tales or the honest-to-God things of nightmares. Scott and Forrest have covered everything from Skinwalker Ranch to Bigfoot to a case of demonic possession known simply as the Sludge Entity. And through exhaustive preparation for their interviews, you'll hear the most comprehensive and thorough conversations with experts, authors, and researchers. So, what are you waiting for? Be sure to listen to the Astonishing Legends podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And check out the links in the video description. Thanks so much for your time. And don't forget, you support Chilling Tales for Dark Nights when you visit our sponsors. And your support means a lot to us. Now that we've done our part to refer you to some additional nightmare fuel, allow me to amplify your insomnia with another terrifying tale from author Jeff Sturtevant. As performed by Jason Hill, I present to you The Black Suit.
Mattress yoked over his shoulders like a man condemned to bear it. Jack Stewart made his way up the final flight of stairs to the 5th floor of the Irving Gardens apartment building. From his pocket dangled the green key fob to his new studio. He dropped the mattress in front of the door, apartment 514, and stuck the key in the corroded old doorknob. It was 5 p.m., a ray of dwindling sunlight cutting down the wall from the window at the end of the hallway. By dark, he should be completely moved in. It was only the bed, a handful of bags, and a celebratory case of Bud. He dragged the mattress inside and dropped it in the corner where he figured he'd set up camp. The hollow thump of an empty room. The occasion seemed effused with a kind of sweet loneliness he both cherished and dreaded. For the first time ever, he was completely on his own. Solitude. Independence. 20 minutes later, he was ascending the stairs with the last of his bags slung over his shoulder. These, he dropped in a pile by the mattress and opened one to fish out his pillow. He dropped the pillow on the bed and lay down on his back. Looking around, he tried to familiarize himself with the cracks in the bowed plaster ceilings and walls. Warped woodwork. Painted over so heavily as to fill in the bevels. Somewhere under all that latex was certainly lead. Old transgressions. Buried forever. After a while, he got up and inspected the bathroom. It looked to have been upgraded sometime in the 70s. He scrutinized the corroded chrome fixtures and flaky grout between the floor tiles. He turned the toilet's flush lever, but nothing happened. Under the lid of the tank, he saw the chain connecting the lever and flapper had snapped. No luxury accommodations with the Irving Gardens apartments, but for $1 per square foot of personal space, it was surely a bargain. Whatever it took, he would make it livable. Jack went back to the main room, took a beer out of the case and popped the top. He began unpacking his things. His only furniture was a table, 2 chairs, and a dresser. He tucked his shirts and pants into the bottom drawers and his socks and underwear on top. There was a closet between the front door and the bathroom with a dressing mirror hung on the door. He took his coat to the closet, hoping the previous tenant had left him a hanger or two. When he opened it, though, he found more than just a hanger. There was a suit hanging inside, a black jacket and matching pants. That's interesting. He unhooked the suit and brought it out to have a look. He was no expert on formal wear, but he thought the suit looked pretty nice, if not a little out of style. Fine-looking fabric, whatever it was. He checked for the make, but there were no labels in either the collar or the pants. Feeling faintly silly, he brought the jacket to his face and sniffed. It looked brand new, but was still a little musty from closet time. Must have been in there for quite a while. Jack hung the suit back up, folded his own jacket, and tucked it up on the top shelf. He fished the business card out of his pocket, the one Al gave him, along with his room key earlier in the day. Al was the superintendent, an ex-prizefighter and lifelong handyman in his 70s. He'd been living and maintaining this building for 40 years. There was a good chance he'd laid down a lot of that lead paint himself. He'd lost his wife 35 years ago, he'd said, and lived here alone ever since. He must know who the suit belonged to. It was also a good excuse to summon him about the minor toilet problem. Jack leaned against the closet door and dialed Al's number. "This is Al." It's Jack. The guy in 514? "Aye. Let me guess. The toilet." Jack chuckled. "So you already know about it. Well, I gotta get to the hardware store. I was gonna quick fix it with a pull chain for the closet light, but I thought better of it." Hey, speaking of the closet, what's the story with the suit in there? Do you know? Right, aye. The suit. Forgot to tell you about that. After a little weird pause, Al cleared his throat. Just leave it be, if it's all the same to you. Whose is it? Well, it isn't exactly anybody's. Just think it's part of the apartment. You know what I mean? Like part of the apartment's history? Another pause, this one a bit longer. And kinda like that. If you could just leave it be, I'd appreciate it. You don't bother it, and it won't bother you. Satisfied? He was anything but satisfied. Al's response had only made him curious, but the conversation was getting uncomfortable, so he decided to let it go. Fair enough, Jack said. Thanks, buddy. I'll get to the store tomorrow. Probably pick up a bunch of them chains. Seems like everyone's a rusting up. Hard water and all that, you know? Ha! Gotcha, Jack said. Thanks, Al. Jack hung up. He polished off the beer and uncapped a second. Nothing like a few drinks to make you feel more at home, even in a 100-year-old studio with a mysterious suit in the closet. A suit that wouldn't bother him if he didn't bother it. What a mysterious thing to say about a suit. A few beers later, and he was hooking up his VCR to the TV. A box set of Columbo episodes to continue the evening's mystery theme. He unpacked his toiletries, showered, and brushed his teeth. He piled his luggage to make an impromptu sofa and settled in to watch TV. By his side, the empty beer bottles accumulated. 3, 4, 6, 8. The sweet sense of loneliness, turning only to sweet. 3 episodes into the first season of Columbo, Jack was snoring soundly into a pile of linens. Jack woke sometime in the night with an odd sense of foreboding. It was quiet in the city streets below. Yellow arc sodium lamplight cast a strange, long shadow across the floor and onto the wall. He turned his head. He froze. There, in front of the window, stood the form of a headless man. It took him a moment to recognize what he was looking at. It was the suit. The weird old suit from the closet. Standing there like someone was wearing it. Like it was looking out the window. Am I dreaming? Hallucinating? He watched silently, both he and the suit unmoving. Had to be a dream. A drunken, exhausted dream brought on by his uneasiness in the new apartment. But no, he was wide awake. That left hallucinating. Was he a schizo all of a sudden? Should he add that to his list of problems? Or was it a ghost? There is no fucking way, he said. Seizing on a moment of courage, he rolled out of bed and made for the suit. Whether he meant to grab it or tackle it, he didn't even know. He was 21 years old and he wasn't going to be spooked like a little kid just because he was alone in a new place. He dashed for it. But by the time he got to the window, the suit was lying on the floor, its ghostly contents apparently emptied. He just stood there for a minute, half relieved, half confused, looking down at the crumpled heap. He checked his watch. 3:15 a.m. Don't bother the suit, and it won't bother you, huh? Jack didn't know what the hell had just happened, but this much he did know. The suit bothered him. Jack gathered it up, holding it like something soiled. He opened the door and walked down the hall and stuffed the suit into the trash chute. He shut the door and went back to the apartment and washed his hands in the sink. Feeling silly for doing so, he examined the room for any ghostly ephemera he might have missed. Satisfied, he took one more beer from the case and stood drinking it by the window. He looked outside, saw the dark silhouette of the meat plant on the edge of town, the blinking radio tower, The old billboard overlooking the highway near the police outpost. What the hell had just happened? He set the empty beer bottle on the windowsill and went back to bed. Eventually, he fell asleep. When Jack woke up, the sun was strong in the window. His head throbbed. He checked his watch. 11:30 a.m. It was a minute before last night's episode came to mind. The whole thing felt like a drunken fever dream. How drunk had he been anyway? Turning to look, he counted the empty beer bottles arranged like bowling pins next to the mattress. All right, so I must have been pretty drunk. Jack peeled himself off the mattress and went to the closet and opened it. There was the suit, hanging where he left it yesterday. Just as he thought. The whole thing had been a drunken dream. In the wake of it, though, the suit still gave him the creeps. What was it about that thing? Jack showered and dressed and emerged on city streets in search of a strong cup of coffee. At the local coffee shop around the corner, he saw a familiar face behind a newspaper. It was Al, the super. "Hey, Al," Jack said. Al looked up from his paper. "Hey, buddy. I'll be there later to fix the flapper. Everything else okay so far?" "Slept pretty bad my first night, but I guess that's to be expected." "Ah, me too," Al said. "Got woke up round 3:15 by someone slamming the trash chute. Why on earth someone need to take out the trash at 3 in the morning? It's a mystery to me." "Wasn't you then, were it, buddy?" "No," Jack said. "Not me. My apartment's right under there. Work the trash chute that late and you're sure to wake me up. Something to keep in mind." "I'll keep it in mind." "Good," Al said. "As for the toilet, just give me an hour or two." "That's fine," Jack said. Al returned to his paper and Jack sat at the bar and ordered coffee. He gazed down at the sports section a previous diner had left behind, but he wasn't reading. He was replaying last night's dream in his mind, wherein he actually had used the trash chute at 3:15 a.m. One hell of a coincidence, sure. But that's all it could have been, right? First of all, suits don't just walk out of closets and stand by windows. Second of all, it was right there in the closet. Coincidences happen, Jack thought. A couple of hours later, Jack was unpacking the last of his things. There was a knock on the door, and Jack answered it to find Al holding a section of beaded chain and tin snips. "Thanks for coming by," Jack said. "That's a quick fix, buddy. I'll be right out your way." "Sure thing." Al slowed as he walked by the closet door on the way to the bathroom. He appeared to want to look inside, but stopped himself. The two of them met eyes. "So, you saw the suit," Al said. Of course he had, they'd already discussed it. "Why so mysterious about it, if you don't mind me asking?" Al gestured as though to brush it off. "Nah, nothing mysterious," he said. "Like I said, buddy, you just leave it be." "But why?" Al went to the bathroom and lifted the lid off of the toilet tank. Was he trying to ignore him? Jack wouldn't have it. He opened the closet and unhooked the suit. Displaying it like a haberdasher, he carried it to the bathroom and cleared his throat so Al would look. He did, with eyes suddenly wide. "What are you doing with that?" he asked. "Didn't I tell you to leave it be?" "I don't see the harm in it. Tell me what you know about it." "Why not just leave it be? Why are you so insistent that I leave it alone? Is there something about this thing I should know?" Al sighed. It was pretty clear Jack wasn't letting this go. "Look, I don't want to freak you out, buddy. It's a strange thing is all." You're not gonna freak me out," Jack said. "I am not a kid. I just want to know what the big deal is." Al set down the tin snips and held up his hands in supplication. "Fine," he said. "Do you want to know, buddy? I'll tell ya." Creakily, the old man sat down and they entered the bathtub. He regarded the suit in Jack's hands as something fundamentally offensive. "It's been here as long as I have," he said. "Everyone who ever lived in this room wanted to get rid of it. They'd leave it by the door, throw it out with the trash, whatever. But every time, it'd end up right back in the closet, all by itself. Don't no one knows the hows or whys of it. Jack paused. That's impossible.
D'you think? Al said. But it's the truth. That's why I told you to leave it alone. Save you the trouble of getting spooked when you do the same thing. It's hard enough getting tenants in the old place, and once they get spooked, they all will run out on me.
Jack searched Al's face for signs he was joking, but there were none. He glanced at the suit in his arms, then at the window where he'd imagined it standing in a dream. Then, for the first time, he noticed the empty beer bottle sitting on the windowsill, the one he'd put there before going back to bed. I can't believe it. It really happened. Al seemed to pick up on Jack's inner monologue.
You already tried getting rid of it, didn't you?
Jack looked back at Al. After a pause, he said, "It was me at the trash chute last night." Al let out a little chuckle, shook his head.
People tend to be afraid of what they don't understand. But there's no need to be afraid. That suit belongs in the closet. All you got to do is leave it there.
I guess it just kind of gave me the creeps, Jack said.
Oh, I hear you, buddy boy. But the last thing either of us needs to be thinking about is an old suit. So, why don't you just hang it back up, and we'll both put it out of our minds, eh? From now on, just think of it as part of the woodwork.
Fair enough. Jack nodded. He returned to the closet and hung the suit back on the rod. It seemed to watch him as he closed the door. Part of the woodwork, he reminded himself. Al fixed the toilet and repositioned the lid. They shook hands and Al left. With that, Jack returned to unpacking. He put on the bedclothes, finished setting up his entertainment center, and unpacked the rest of his toiletries. The suit crept into his mind from time to time, but he forced the thoughts away. Just part of the woodwork. Don't bother the suit, and the suit won't bother you. Jack woke in the night to freezing cold. The drapes around the window were billowing in the wind. Had he left it open last night? It was freezing outside. Why would he have opened it in the first place? He threw the covers off, but stopped in his tracks. It was the suit again. It was standing by the side of the bed, not facing the window. This time, it was facing him. I'm not drunk. I'm not dreaming. I am not hallucinating. So what now? What do you want from me? He whispered. At first, nothing happened. But then, a kind of airy relaxation seemed to come over the suit, almost like it responded to his voice. What do you want? He asked again. It felt awkward, talking to something he didn't quite believe himself, but again, the suit appeared to respond. The shoulders slumped a bit. The cuffs ruffled. Is there something you want from me? The suit relaxed even more now. Where it had been mannequin stiff a minute ago, it now seemed outsized on something smaller. Gently, it began to drift. The arms folded inward. The pants folded lengthwise, then bent at the knees. While Jack sat trembling, the suit folded neatly, all by itself. Then it drifted slowly onto his lap. Jack didn't move. Moments later, the window began to close, the curtain relaxing on their rods. After that, everything was still. Jack checked his watch. It was 3:21 a.m. Jack looked down at the suit, unsure what to do next. The way it had presented itself to him seemed more like a gift than a threat. Was that what it wanted? This ghost, spirit, whatever, to give him the suit? Or was he supposed to do something with it? Put it on? The suit was roughly his size. But what would happen if he put on a haunted outfit? Still, he felt distinctly that this was what it wanted him to do. But why? Should I call Al? He checked his watch again. Bad idea. But there was surely no getting back to sleep tonight. He carried the suit to the table and popped the cap off a beer and sat drinking. He kept an eye around the room for more ghostly evidence, but it was just him in the suit. A few beers later, his nerves were suitably settled. He stared at the suit, wondering what to do. "All right," he said to the empty room, although he knew it wasn't truly empty. With the subtle sensation of being watched, he dropped his shorts. He unbuttoned the pants and slipped them on. He stood and looked down at them. They fit just right, even without a belt. Then he took the jacket, slipped it on, and buttoned it up. He looked in the dressing mirror. Not bad, he thought. So, what now? He waited for a minute, but nothing happened. Stillness in the room. Nothing ghostly, nothing revelatory. Starting to unbutton the jacket, he glanced back in the mirror. Well, that's weird. The reflection in the mirror was somehow brighter than the room itself. In the window behind him, the setting sun cast an orange glow. He turned around, but the night was black as ever. Back in the mirror, it looked more like late evening. So vain, Charlie. When he turned again, the whole room looked like it did in the mirror. There was a woman there, an attractive brunette in an evening gown. She looked set to go out in the town. So did he realized. "I'm so happy you came, darling." The woman embraced him, a soft waft of perfume. He embraced her back, but not of his own doing. He realized he wasn't in control. And the room, he noticed, was nothing like it had been. It looked newer, bright and clean, wallpaper in place of the old drab paint, gaudy carpeting over the wide wooden planks. "No one happier than me, Doris. I'm the luckiest man alive tonight." The words came out in an unfamiliar voice. It wasn't he who had spoken them. He was inside this man, this Charlie, wearing the same suit. He was just going along for the ride. "You just might be," she said. She kissed him. He kissed her back, deeply and passionately. He felt everything. He just wasn't doing it. "How long do we have?" Charlie asked. "I want to cherish every moment. The bastard won't be back until Saturday. I want you with me every moment until then. If he hits you again, Doris, even once, the minute the insurance money comes in, I'll divorce the bastard. Then, you'll have me all to yourself. No more sneaking around ever again." "I can't stand how he hurts you. How could anyone hurt you?" She caressed his face. "It won't be long, darling. I promise." Suddenly, there was a ruckus out in the hallway. Both she and Charlie turned their heads. When their eyes met again, there was terror in Doris's face. "No," she said. The door crashed open. There was a man in the doorway, a brawny, mustachioed brute in slacks and an undershirt, a little drool in the corner of his mouth. A familiar face, just much, much younger. It was Al. "I knew it," he growled. "Al," Doris said. "It's not what it looks like." He rushed her. Charlie got between them, and Al caught him on the chin with a vicious punch. Jack felt every bit of it. Felt his knees go weak, heard his ears ringing. "You're drunk, Al!" "Shut up, you cheating tramp! Who are—" Al's meaty palm connected with Doris's face with a sound like a thunderclap. Something wet splattered Charlie's face, and he knew immediately it was blood. Doris collapsed bonelessly on the carpet. "And you there, buddy boy." Charlie got his bearings and threw a punch of his own. Al ducked it. He countered with a hook to the ribs, then a brutal cross to the side of his head. Charlie's face hit the floor, and the world went dark. Jack woke up to muffled sobs. "Whore. Filthy whore." He turned his head. Doris was prone, her face buried in the carpet, her dress torn off and thrown aside. Al on top of her, his pants around his knees, his forearm on the back of her neck.
"Get off of her,"
Charlie groaned.
"Aye, if it ain't Sleeping Beauty. Oh, I'll be getting off your little girlfriend soon as I'm done with her."
Charlie struggled, but he couldn't move. His wrists and ankles were bound with torn strips of Doris's dress.
"You son of a bitch! You'll never get away with this!"
Al only humped more furiously, grinding his forearm harder into the back of Doris's neck. A few last thrusts, and he ceased his assault. He pushed himself off her and got to his feet and buckled his pants. Then, he wound up a foot and kicked her hard in the side.
"Get away with what now?"
Al asked.
"Making love to my own wife. I haven't even gotten started with you yet, buddy."
Just leave her alone. Please, Al. Grinning, Al walked to the kitchen area. From a drawer, he extracted a large rolling pin. He weighed it in his hand, gripped it by a handle, and swung it like a bat. Jack's heart and Charlie's heart were one, racing in his chest.
"Oh, I'll leave the both of you alone. Don't you worry about it, buddy. Alone in a goddamn hole."
Please, Al. Don't do anything you're going to regret.
"Regret?"
He turned to look at his wife, battered and bleeding on the carpet.
Think she regretted all the running around she's been doing. Not until tonight she didn't. I'll bet she regrets it now, though. Don't you think? Buddy boy.
I know what you do to her, Charlie said. I see the cuts, the bruises. How can you blame her for trying to get away from you?
She's my property!
Al brought the rolling pin down in the middle of her back with a sickening thump. Doris screamed. The blow seemed to leave an artificial arch where there wasn't one before.
Stop, Al!
He brought it down again, this time on her right shoulder, then again on her left. With each blow, her body was thrown into unnatural contortions. The final blow, the hardest of them all, sunk into the back of her head. Their marriage, along with her agonies, promptly brought to a close. Oh God. Oh God, Doris. Al straightened up, his eyes full of blue insanity. He turned his attention to Charlie.
Till death do us part. Right, buddy. Guess that about does it. You murdered her. Oh, you got it all wrong there, buddy. You murdered her. You killed the bitch when you decided to mess with another man's property. And look at what you got yourself into. Now you've gone and killed yourself, too.
Charlie didn't even have time to protest. The rolling pin landed on his back, vertebrae crushed. Again on his ribs. Again on his shoulder. His knees. His elbows. Jack being pummeled. Crushed. Only when the final blow came was he delivered from the agony. He saw white, then red, then black. When he woke again, the pain was gone. He was in the trunk of a moving car, a muffled tune playing over the radio. He smelled excrement, blood. He felt the car turn, then the rumble of gravel underneath. Soon, it came to a stop. Momentarily, the trunk creaked open. A clear night sky, and Al's wild eyes. Enjoy the ride, buddy boy? Charlie didn't answer. He couldn't answer. Jack knew why. Charlie was dead. Jack was alive inside of him. But Charlie was dead. So was Doris. Al seized him by the lapels of his jacket and dragged him out of the trunk, dumped him on the ground. He landed face up. He could make out the car by the back of it. An early '60s Chevy Impala. Al pulled out Doris and dumped her next to him. He just stood there a minute, chest heaving, looking crazily about. He wiped his forehead with the back of his sleeve.
Ladies first. You don't mind, do you, buddy boy?
Al stepped out of Jack's field of vision. He heard Doris's body dragging through the gravel. Dragging. Quieter. Gone. When Al came back, the moon was high in the sky.
Sorry to keep you waiting, buddy boy.
How Jack wanted to answer him. He'd never felt so helpless. Not once in his life. Al lifted his legs and started to drag him. Charlie's head lulled, giving him a different view of his surroundings. Behind the trees to the left, he thought he recognized something. The bulletin board. I think I know where we are. As Al dragged him further along, he tried to picture from the perspective of his apartment window where they might be headed. The bulletin board was near the edge of town. The old meat plant was far off to the left. Meanwhile, they were going into the woods. Charlie's head hit something in the ground and turned to the right, giving Jack a different view. Now he could see the blinking red light of the radio tower. The radio tower off to the right. The small patch of woods. We must be. A glimpse of the picnic area confirmed it. Gilbert Park.
You should have brought your bait and trunks, buddy boy. Shame about that nice suit.
Gilbert Lake. He killed his wife, killed this guy, and dumped them in Gilbert Lake. 35 years ago. And the suit. It's Charlie. He's been trying to tell me what happened. Trying to... With the revelation, Jack felt himself slipping away. The last things he heard were the gentle lapping of water against the bank. Heavy chains on the floor of the boat. Some muffled swear, followed by a comment on Doris's weight. But from all to follow, he'd be spared. He found himself back in front of the mirror in his dark and dingy apartment. Present day. He unbuttoned the jacket, slipped out of it, let the pants drop to the floor. He turned from the mirror, looked at the spot of the floor where 35 years ago Doris and Charlie were murdered. He could still see Al on top of Doris, raping her, beating her to death before his own eyes. Even worse, he could still feel the rolling pin crashing into his own back, his own ribs, his own skull. By proxy, Al had killed him too, and he'd gotten away with all of it. Gritting his teeth, Jack picked up the phone and started calling the police. But he stopped. What would he tell them? How could he prove it? There were 2 bodies in Gilbert Lake. There was no doubt in Jack's mind, but buried in 35 years of silt and sediment. Meanwhile, if he told the cops the truth, they'd throw him in the loony bin. So, what was he supposed to do? He checked his watch. 3:30 a.m. The whole thing had taken only minutes. He had truly been transported to another time. All the while, the murderer was sleeping soundly downstairs without a care in the world. Sleeping soundly. Having not only murdered Doris and Charlie, but also murdered him. Fuck this! Enraged, Jack stormed out into the hall, went to the trash chute, and began slamming the door. Bang, bang, bang. He slammed the door over and over, slammed it until he heard the footsteps in the stairwell, kept slamming until he saw the murderer's silhouette in the moonlit window at the end of the hallway. Jack, are you out of your mind? I know what you did, Jack said, leveling a finger at the man. What are you talking about? Jack took a few steps toward him. You beat them to death. You dumped them in the lake. By now, a couple of other tenants were standing in their doorways. It appeared none of them dared to interfere.
Charlie and Doris, Jack went on. I know everything. I felt everything. The rolling pin, the Chevy Impala. I know where the bodies are, Al. The jig is up.
Al's chest was rising and falling rapidly. His face, though, had turned from despondent to defeated.
The suit, huh? Charlie's suit, Jack said. It showed me everything.
A pause. The tenants stood wide eyes in their doorways. Al looked down.
Well, I'll be damned, he said. I should have known that bastard could do more than just reappear. Hell, I'd have kept that room myself if I knew it. Damn suit just gave me the creeps. How could you have done that? You murdered them, Al. You got no idea what you put me through, Jack. The cheating, the running around. I was just so angry. You beat her, Jack said. You beat her. You raped her. And you killed her. And I can prove it. It's over, buddy boy.
Al was pacing the end of the hallway.
You know, after 35 years, you'd think you're pretty much home free.
He chuckled ironically.
But a fellow my age ain't exactly fit for prison.
Another door opened then. At least 5 sets of eyes on Al now. Jack was grateful for them, in case the desperate old man decided to try something.
Shouldn't complain, though, Al continued. I had a good run while it lasted. There's just one more thing you need to know. Something I'm sure old Charlie didn't tell you.
What's that? Asked Jack.
Toilet chains are on my desk. You help yourself.
With that, the old man turned and ran for the window.
Stop!
Shouted Jack. But it was too late. He crashed through the glass head first. When Jack reached the window, he saw the broken, writhing figure 5 floors below. Blood gathering in a pool around him. His arms and legs broken and bent at odd angles. He remembered the way Doris had looked after he'd beaten her. 35 years it took. But Al had proved Charlie right. In the end, he would regret it. It took Al 2 hours to die, but die he did. With no family or relatives to vouch for him, his body ended up in a cemetery for the unclaimed. Old transgressions buried forever. All set up in the apartment now, Jack popped a beer and sat on the couch. The suit was hanging back in the closet where it belonged. He could get rid of it if he wanted to, he knew. With Charlie's soul at rest, there'd be no reason for it to come back again. It was all right, though. The suit no longer gave him the creeps. No more walking around the apartment at night, bedside visits, etc. He'd even had it cleaned. History aside, after all, it was a pretty nice suit. Some suits just begged to be worn, Jack thought.
I hope you enjoyed The Black Suit, as written by Jeff Sturdivant and performed by the very talented Jason Hill. You can hear more of Jason right here on Chilling Tales YouTube channel, or search for his podcast, Horror Hill, by name on your favorite podcast app of choice. You won't be sorry you did. Up next, we've got a third helping of frightening fiction for you. This another Chilling Tales for Dark Nights original, courtesy of prolific author Kyle Harrison, perhaps better known by his Reddit no-sleep handle, Color Blindness. In it, a new couple moves into their dream house. Shortly thereafter, the wife comes into contact with a ghostly apparition of unknown origins. Will her efforts to ignore and eventually confront this spirit lead her to answers, or to discoveries far more grisly? Stay tuned and find out. Without further ado, I present to you the little boy at the top of the stairs.
It was only a faint giggle at first. It started last March, a week after we moved into our new place. We came to Camden to start over. My husband Ted had just lost a job up near Little Rock, so going back to where we both grew up made the most sense, especially since the housing market is fairly reasonable here. The tough part was already done before we got there. I had scoured Zillow, Realtor.com, Trulia, you name it. We had about 7 different options, but the one near the old water tower felt special to me. When I looked at the old brick and the cobblestone pathway, I had a connection to them. The virtual tour showed me an open den connecting to the floor, a spacious basement, and even extra rooms on the second floor. Maybe we could turn one of those into a nursery soon. Ted teased as I showed him. We'd been thinking about having a family for quite some time, and the more I looked at the prospective house, the more I was sure this was the place for us. I felt at home there, even though I had never stepped foot into it. Like it was a part of me. Ted's brother Austin came to help us move everything into the 2-story cottage, and I agreed to cook us all pizza and celebrate. We needed something to feel good about after all the bad luck we've been having lately. "Ted, have you seen the pots and pans?" I asked as they moved the couch into the den. Yeah, I think I put them upstairs, in the room I'm going to turn into an office," he responded, grunting as they struggled to turn the corner. "Oh, please be careful, and don't scuff up the paint," I told them both as I squeezed by them and went to find the box. Thankfully, I had made sure to mark all of our boxes so they would be easily identifiable, something my mom taught me, so grabbing it hadn't taken much effort at all. It was when I was stepping out into the hallway and moving toward the stairs that I heard it. It was soft at first, almost like the house was settling, but definitely noticeable. This gentle, playful whistle was followed by a laugh, like that from a toddler. It actually made me stop and glance around the long corridor, thinking I was hearing things. Then, I heard it again, and I looked straight ahead, toward the end of the hallway, where a long wall mirror was hanging, and I thought I saw something out of the corner of my eye. I shrugged it off and went back to the kitchen to get started. A few minutes later, though, when Ted and Austin came in with the flat screen, I paused to grab a glass of water and muttered, "Honey, did you leave the back door open when you came by yesterday?" They carefully set the Samsung 46-inch down. Ted wiped his brow before answering. "What? No. What are you talking about?" "Oh, it's nothing," I said dismissively as I heard the oven go off. "You boys sit down and take a break. Pizza will be ready in about 3 to 5 minutes. "No objections there," Austin said. "I'm gonna go wash up," Ted added as I set the table. I almost forgot about the strange laughter upstairs. Almost. It took them about 4 hours more to get everything inside. I helped with the lighter stuff and started taking everything else out of the boxes, putting it in the proper place. I avoided going back upstairs, though. Not alone, anyway. I know it's silly, but something made the hair on my arm stand up whenever I got anywhere close to those stairs. Thankfully, Ted and his brother were busy on the second floor, putting together our king-size bed, so it wasn't an issue. Besides, I figured the bad feeling I had would eventually pass. "I think that's everything," Austin said as he brought in the last few boxes. Ted was in the garage hooking up the washer and dryer, so he asked me if I could take them up to the bedroom. "I'm bushed," he explained. I couldn't think of an excuse to avoid the stairs, so I went ahead and grabbed the boxes, slowly climbing the steps again. I was tense. I don't know why. I've never believed in anything like ghosts. I've heard people talk about that kind of stuff before, but I figured it was always because of wanting attention. It's not like anything was out of place when the realtor showed us the place. That's why, when I put the box down in the master bathroom, I knew I must be letting my nerves get to me. This will pass once I get used to the house, I told myself. But when I went back out to the hall, I heard that same laughter again. and it made a chill run up and down my spine.
Ted, is that you?
I called out, hoping that my husband was simply playing a prank on me. He knew that I was easily scared. When there was no response, I tried his brother. But again, silence answered me back. Then, a few seconds later, as I got to the first step going down, I heard that laughter again. It was so faint, as if it was all inside my head, but it bothered me more than ever before.
Did you get lost?
Austin teased as I came back to the den.
Sorry, I
was putting a few things away, I told him.
When are you going to get cable hooked up? Oh, I wanted to watch the basketball game,
Austin said as he sprawled on the couch. Ted came in from the garage looking exhausted and remarked, "Right now, all I want to do is get some sleep." He stood there looking at his brother, hoping that Austin would take the hint to go ahead and leave. After a few moments of awkward silence, his brother yawned and said, "Sure. Anyway, I guess I'll see you next week." "Sounds good," Ted answered, giving his brother a pat on the back as Austin left. We stood on the front porch and waved as he was about to get in his Jeep at the front of the driveway.
"What about the moving truck?"
I asked, staring over at the U-Haul. Ted sighed in frustration. "I forgot all about that. Guess we better return it tonight or they'll charge us for another whole day." I tensed up, immediately regretting making the suggestion in the first place. Ted waved his brother down to stop him as he backed out, and the two talked near our mailbox. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I secretly hoped that Austin would say no. I didn't want to be alone in the house, even if it was for a short period of time. Ted walked back up to me and sighed. "Austin's going to follow me over there. If we leave now, we can get to the store before they close." I frowned as he kissed me and I mumbled, "Do you really have to? Is it really that much?" He didn't know the reason for my complaint, and I doubted he would even take it under consideration if I told him. Instead, he climbed into the driver's seat of the moving truck and rolled down the window to talk to me as he started the engine. "You gonna stay up for me?" he asked. I smiled and said yeah, as I wrapped my arms around my body uncomfortably. "Hurry back," I added. He winked and rolled up the window, turning his attention to the road as he too backed out. I watched until they both disappeared into the gloom, heading toward town. Then I stood on the porch for another few minutes, trying to convince myself it was safe to go inside. The house felt empty when I closed the door, despite all the stuff we had just filled it with. I sat down on the couch and tried to distract myself with Facebook and Instagram. For the first 10 minutes, nothing happened, and I relaxed, telling myself that I had simply been imagining things earlier. That feeling of security didn't last long, though. "Hello?" My body went stiff. I sat up and looked around, trying to stay calm. Did I respond? Should I ignore it? I chose the latter and kept looking at my phone. There was no one there, I told myself. Then I heard the sound of a ball bouncing, like someone was dribbling down the hall. I tried to call Ted, but it went straight to voicemail. Then, the voice returned. This time not so faint. "Hello?" I started trying to call my parents just to talk to someone and distract myself, but no one was responding to my texts or calls. I can't tell you how alone I felt. My hands were shaking. I felt like I needed to vomit. But then I felt stupid. Nothing was going to happen. I convinced myself to stand up and move toward the steps. I had to confront this irrational fear, and then it would go away. Or so I thought. I stood there, feeling like a complete fool. Then, I made a challenging taunt. "I'm not scared of you!" I shouted to the emptiness. Nothing. Just like I expected. I turned to sit back down and then heard the giggle again, followed by the sound of the ball. I didn't look, but a moment later, a small, bouncy yellow ball rolled past my feet. I nearly screamed. Then Ted walked through the door. "Hey, you okay? Looks like you've seen a ghost," he joked. I ran to him and did my best not to collapse in tears. "Whoa, are you all right?" he asked as he held me. "There's someone in the house," I told him. He stiffened up and looked toward the stairs. I nodded silently. He grabbed his keys, gripping them in between his fingers as he went to check out the rooms. I stood there, at the bottom of the steps, waiting to see what happened. He returned a moment later and called me up. "There's nobody here. What's gotten into you?" he asked, rubbing my shoulders. "I'm sorry. I'm just tired, I guess," I said, staring down at the bouncy ball. "It's just... this somehow got downstairs." He looked at it and picked it up, smiling before providing a rational explanation. "Oh, I'm sure I probably stacked some of the boxes wrong and one fell over, making the ball tumble down," he said. I nodded and followed him to the master bedroom, hoping that I didn't hear any more strange childish laughter tonight. "Oh, it's going to be fine. I'll protect you," he whispered as we snuggled close. It was hard to fall asleep that first night. I kept waiting for another taunt from the house, but nothing happened. And for some reason, the quiet stillness bothered me more. We settled in and Ted finally started a new job at the hospital. He drove to the interview on Saturday afternoon, leaving me alone in the house for the first time in weeks. "The supervisor needs me to work a couple graveyard shifts just until they hire a few more people," he told me on the phone. I had insisted that he call us as soon as he was out of the interview. Strange as it sounds, I thought the ghost had stopped bothering me because Ted was nearby. "It's only going to be for a little while, babe," he repeated. The news made me feel uneasy. Even though I had not heard the laughter again since that first night, I didn't want Ted to start working, especially not at night. "Isn't there someone else who can take those hours?" I asked as I slowly finished my chores. I tried to keep myself busy with anything while he was gone. "Babe, we need the money. Those few odd jobs and shit I sold on eBay isn't going to cut it," he told me. He was right, of course. I didn't need to keep living in fear. But the second I got off the phone with him, the laughter returned. The nightmare had started all over again. "I know what you're doing and it's not going to work," I told the ghost. "I'm not scared of you, and I'm not going to talk to you again," I said, letting my voice echo up the living room. So you can just leave." The spirit made no reply, but I would get an answer soon enough. Ted went to work that next Tuesday, leaving the house at around 7:19. I insisted he stay on the phone with me until he got there. My excuse was that it was storming and I wanted to be sure that he was okay. "Scared to be in the house alone?" he teased, picking up on my unease. I had finally talked the night before about the ghost and he had taken me seriously then. Spirits linger in houses for a variety of reasons. My mom said she saw one a lot when she was a little girl. "Has the ghost tried to hurt you?" he had asked as we cuddled together. "I just don't know what it wants or why this house picked me," I admitted. Sometimes they can offer important messages. Warnings from the past, even visions of the future. Maybe you should confront the spirit the next time it happens. Get a feel of it, you know? It might be trying to tell you something," he suggested. That memory lingered as he prepared to step out the door, asking me if I was going to be all right alone. "I'll be fine," I said. I don't know if I was telling him or trying to give myself a pep talk. I figured I would draw myself a bath, watch a little Netflix, and then go to bed until he got home. Although I had promised Ted I would take his advice, another strategy had developed in my head. As long as I don't acknowledge it, it will just go away, I thought as I started the hot water. It can be so hard to feel like a prisoner in your own home. But I was determined to win this fight. Once finished, I grabbed a nightrobe and settled into the tub, letting the soap and soothing warm water relax me. I closed my eyes and put Rihanna on Pandora to keep me distracted. The music lifted my mood, and I gently cried, praying that tonight I wouldn't have a visit. I think someone was listening to that prayer, but it certainly wasn't God. As the first song ended, this strange, peculiar tune played instead. It sounded like a distorted version of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. "Why won't you play with me?" My eyes bulged open and I stared toward the open door. There, in the hallway, I saw the silhouette of a small boy, probably no older than 3 or 4. I don't know how long we gazed at each other. Could have been hours. I didn't know what to do. And then, the boy repeated his question and pushed the door open. "What do you want from me?" I asked anxiously as he walked into the bathroom. He was wearing overalls and a Paw Patrol shirt, his blonde hair and soft green eyes reminding me a little of my father. "Play with me?" he insisted, and then ran into the hallway. I waited a moment, closing my eyes and trying to push the apparition away. Even the music changed back to normal. Finally, silence fell over the house. Was he gone? I climbed out of the bath and slowly got dressed, carefully checking the hall to be sure that I was alone. I crept toward the master bedroom, hoping my demand for the spirit to leave had worked. Instead, as I reached the end of the hall, I saw the boy again in the mirror. This time, standing near Ted's office, the corner room. "Who are you?" the boy asked as he got closer. His little feet made a strange noise as he approached me. He was so close to me. Please just leave me alone," I told the ghost. "Why?" the boy asked, touching my hand. I felt it. It made me jolt and step backwards. But instead of hitting solid ground, my foot tumbled backwards and I lost my balance. I was at the top of the stairs. Before I knew what was coming, I fell head over heels, my body banging and crumpling as I tumbled down the stairs. My head slammed against the floor and I lay still, pain coursing through me as the room spun. I could still just barely see the boy standing at the top of the stairs. He was looking at me curiously, and I screamed. Please, just go away!" I shouted at the top of my lungs as I tried to move. I couldn't. I had broken something. Any move I made only caused more pain to shoot through my body. I closed my eyes and kept sobbing. The next thing I remember was Ted was over me, calling paramedics. I think it took 4 of them to carefully get me on the stretcher and take me to the ER. As I kept fading in and out of consciousness, all I heard was that boy's playful voice. "Come and play with me," he taunted me. I kept asking it to stop. Then, everything went black. The sound of a heart monitor brought me back. It was well into the night, but I could see that the emergency team had done its best to patch me up. I had bandages and bruises all over my body. Then, I saw Ted was asleep in the chair beside me, and I nudged him awake. "Thank God," he said as he squeezed my hand and wiped away the tears from his eyes. I was so worried. "Oh God, I'm so glad you're okay," he said. "How bad is it?" I asked. The doctor came into our room. "Everything looks fine. Aside from the initial loss, I think you're going to only have minimal bruising," he said. "Loss? What do you mean?" I asked. Ted squeezed my hand, his eyes searching for the right words to say. "Babe, you're pregnant. Almost 4 weeks." I felt my heart drop. Suddenly, everything the doctor and him were saying became muffled like I was drowning. I let go of his hand and felt numb inside, realizing exactly why the ghost had been coming to see me so regularly. Ted's speculation had been right. it wasn't a spirit from the past at all. It was a portent from the future. The next day we came home and Ted said he would take off work to make sure I was all right. For the first time since we moved, I insisted I wanted to be alone. "I'll just rest until you get back," I told him. He seemed hesitant to give in to me, but finally agreed and went to work the next day. As soon as he left and I heard his car drive away, I sat up in the bed and decided to try something unthinkable. "Hello?" I called out, but no response came. Gingerly, I crept out of the bed and moved to the hallway, my hand cradling the scars on my body where they had rushed to save me. Please come back," I whispered into the quiet corridor. But no laughter ever came.
I hope you enjoyed The Little Boy at the Top of the Stairs, as written by Kyle Harrison and performed by Jason Hill. If you're interested in seeing your work appear here on Chilling Tales for Dark Nights, or are interested in joining our writing team, we accept submissions. Send your original fiction in to director Craig Groshek at craig@chillingtalesfordarknights.com with story submission in the subject line, alongside the title of your tale, and we'll take a look. We look forward to seeing your amazing work and considering it for production. Now, up next, we've got another dose of darkness. This one another Chilling Tales exclusive from author Christopher Howard Wolfe, better known within the creepypasta and short horror communities as Slime Beast. No one is scared of cliched sheet ghosts, but maybe they should be. When a young man awakens to find himself alone in a hospital bed, reality itself seems to fracture. What is the mysterious spirit that haunts him? What does it want from him? And will he pay the price to save his life? Stay tuned and find out. Without further ado, I present to you Sheet Ghost.
Have you ever seen a sheet ghost? You know, the generic hovering spook dressed in a white sheet with eye holes. You've only seen them on television and in movies, right? Charlie Brown dressed as one. Mystery Inc. unmasked one on every episode of Scooby-Doo. However, actual ghost stories rarely adopt this image. Real ghosts, if you believe in them, usually take the form of boring orbs of light or plain old humans. People laugh at the idea of a cartoon ghost fluttering about, but at least it's a touch more creative than some random semi-transparent person. So what would you say if I told you I've seen a sheet ghost? Maybe you chuckled a bit when I said that. Maybe you shook your head disapprovingly and you're about to stop listening. I'd advise against it. When I'm done, you might find yourself just a little more wary of sheet-clad specters than you were before. When I was 15, I fractured both of my forearms. Up until that point in my life, I displayed that sense of immortality older folks always accuse teens of having. I behaved like I was invincible, which led to a skateboard jump that probably looked amazing for about 3 seconds. Then I threw my arms out in front of me to stop the oncoming pavement. The gruesome twin pops told me everything I needed to know before the runaway train of agony traveled to my brain. And after my friends were through freaking out, a call to 911 had me in the back of an ambulance and on my way to Hokum County Hospital. You know how it went from there. I was partially scolded by EMS workers for not wearing elbow or knee pads. Nurses in the emergency room told me I was fortunate not to have broken anything else, and so on. I tuned them out at the time, partially because I was an angsty teenager and partially because I was in the worst pain I had felt in my life. So far, at least. Luckily, only one wrist needed surgery. The other would heal itself over time. I found myself in double casts when I woke up after the procedure. I studied my arms and chuckled, declaring that I was the world's largest lobster, a concept likely brought about by the medication. The stickers and writing on my casts told me that some of my dumbass friends had come by while I was still knocked out, and had probably left out of boredom shortly thereafter. As my vision and my mind cleared, I read the scribblings out loud. Glad you didn't die. Get well, you smell, go to hell. I wasn't watching, do it again. Classic. The audible wheezing started while I was peeling off an Arcade Fire sticker. I didn't pay any attention to whoever was in the bed next to mine until that wheeze built into a rasping cough. After a few awkward moments of staring at the curtain dividing us, I couldn't take the guttural retching for any longer without speaking up angrily. "Dude!" I commented. Admittedly, I was only concerned with how much the patient was grossing me out, but again, I was 15. "Dude, are you all right, or?" I asked, trailing off so the whooping chain smoker could interrupt and tell me they were fine. Instead, there was no answer, just noise. I leaned dangerously far off the bed, especially in my woozy state. I threw the curtain aside with a rough sweep of a nearly numb arm. The bed was empty. There was no second patient. Worse yet, I could still hear the gradual tapering off of a pathetic, barely audible wheeze. The bed wasn't just empty. It was pristine, covered with a perfectly crisp white sheet, and ready for the next person who needed a place to recover. I picked up the button to ring for a nurse as best I could, and was about to mash it down with the other hand. All at once, feelings of embarrassment came over me as I realized my phantom roommate must have been another byproduct of the drugs. I put the button back down and laughed to myself as I studied the bare bed once again. Then, the sheet began to rise, feeling like an inflating lung drawing a slow, deep breath. I stared, confused at first, and then stupefied as it settled into the shape of a covered, motionless body. I fumbled for the call button again, jamming it rapidly. The draped figure sat up slowly from the bed, its rigid form staring forward and, thankfully, paying no attention to my presence. I stared in the stunned silence as the figure slid from the bed and stood, never dropping the sheet that draped back over its head. The body behind the sheet, as far as I could see, did not exist. I know what you're expecting at this point, and no, I didn't follow it. I sat there like a good boy and waited for the nurse to come in and tell me I was suffering from a pretty hardcore hallucination. I sat for minutes on end, watching as the cloaked figure stood facing the room's door, groaning loudly to itself. The sound was a droning, almost forlorn, "Oh." It repeated the ominous noise again and again, until I was completely convinced I would lose my mind. If the stomach-gnawing dread didn't do me in, the soul-chilling din would. No one was coming. Somewhere deep inside, I knew that for a fact. I didn't understand what was happening, but I was slowly coming to the realization that, yes, it indeed was happening. The silver doorknob caught my attention. One groping turn, even with my useless arms, would allow the thing to pass through the doorway, relieving me of its horrifying presence. So, I did it. I stood up, approached cautiously, and let it out. A jolt of terror electrified my nervous system as the sheet-covered non-entity unexpectedly turned, and with one sweeping motion, grabbed at my arm. Its face, that blank, expressionless face indented in fabric, hung motionless before me. Even though there was no readable emotion on it, I could feel that the thing was taking full notice of me for the first time since it appeared. I backed away quickly, nearly stumbling over my own feet as an empty bedsheet moved through the doorway. Relief washed over me as I nearly crumpled to the floor. My head felt light, and the beating of my racing heart rose up in my ears to replace the ghostly wail. The door creaked on its hinges, echoing in the silent hall beyond. There were no voices, no beeps and boops of medical equipment, nothing but the groan gradually fading into the distance. I called out for help to anyone who could hear me. I was met with that same eerie silence. Cautiously poking my head out of the door, I could see the figure was a safe distance away, steadily shambling its way through a pair of push doors. I squinted at the signage near the end of the hall, and one word immediately stood out to me. Mortuary. The morgue. Yep, that was enough for me. I closed the door as quietly as possible, crept back to my bed, and tucked myself right in. I noped out of the situation in as calm and orderly fashion as humanly possible. I don't know if you've ever heard the term out of sight, out of mind, but I tried to live that phrase. Alone in the room once more, I decided that I had indeed been hallucinating, and that absolutely nothing was out of the ordinary. Repeated glances to the bed next to me, now lying bare, defied my attempts to regain some shred of comfort. Its covering was gone. No matter how many times I looked away, closed my eyes, slowly counted to 10, and looked back. After a brief period of time that felt like an eternity, I decided that it had always been that way. I chuckled at the absurdity of me imagining a made bed. I laid back, squeezed my eyes shut, and tried to force sleep. All that I could see, of course, was a certain white figure, standing motionless in the pitch-black void behind my eyelids. I could try to fool myself, but the human mind doesn't let go of those images quite so easily. A realization dawned on me, causing my eyes to pop open again. The nurse still hadn't come. I could deny everything else until fatigue eventually won out and I slipped into a dream, but the fact that no one had answered the call button was an inarguable fact. I pressed it again, then a third time. Nothing. For all I knew, I was alone, isolated in a strange second state of being with only the memories of a phantom to keep me company. With the icy, bone-fingered grip of fright clasping my insides once more, I curled up in a fetal position and drew the blanket over my head. I had to shut the world out until it decided to behave properly and start making sense again. A new sound violated my ears. It was the most awful, maddening sound yet. An alarm rang out through the hospital, bringing to mind every doomsday scenario I'd seen in a disaster movie. The repeated digital squeal was wrong. It slowed down and warped, dragging each death knell out into the most obnoxious, garbled screech. I had to leave. Not just the bed, not just the room, but the entire hospital. The almost pleasant post-surgery numbness was giving way to a dull ache that would only grow more insufferable over time. I didn't care, though. I'd choose the pain over staying in that madhouse any day. The roar of the alarm grew louder as I moved my head from the pillow and threw my blanket to the floor. Darkness. All that I could see of the room were faded swaths of reality bathed in the flickering red emergency lighting. I don't remember if I cried out, but I know I wouldn't have been able to hear myself over the din either way. I leaned against the wall and made my way back to the door, pushing the lever down again and swinging it open with my foot. The hallway was just as confusing, warning lights flickering in a weak attempt to lay out a path to safety. I kept to the wall as I moved through, pressing the casts against my ears to lessen the sensory overload. My brisk walk along the suggested route to the exit was halted when I realized where I was headed. The mortuary. The double doors were right in front of me and I hadn't noticed until I was face to face with them. It made no sense. I thought that I must have gotten turned around, that no actual route of escape would lead deeper into the building. But the conclusion was clear. Even with the distractions around me, I knew I was being guided in the wrong direction. The lit path, the pointing exit signs, and even the floor plan affixed to the wall were directly lying to me. So, naturally, the most sensible option was to turn around and do the exact opposite of what they said. I pivoted on my heels and sprinted in the other direction. I could feel my brow knotting up in confusion as I looked ahead. Through some deformity of time and space, I found myself once again headed toward the distant doors of the hospital morgue. Both ends of the hallway ended at the same location. No matter how rapidly I looked between them, both duplicates of the entrance remained firmly in place. I didn't need to get back to my room. I needed to get into any room. I had no idea what floor of the building I was on, but I knew I was going out of a window regardless. Flinging a random door open, I ducked through and into what should have been safety. Instead, I found that the door opened back into the same corridor with the same intimidating destination. The room number read 318, but the interior was a red-drenched hallway. Moving to the next door, I found 317 opened into the same exact space. So did 316, 315, and so on. I lost all hope in that moment. Either I was trapped in a nightmare I couldn't wake from, or I was going to die from the throbbing stress of sight and sound that threatened to burst my heart and mind. Neither option looked good. Boom. The double doors flew open, thrown wide as if they had been kicked out. In every direction all around me, an inexplicable house of mirrors displayed nearly identical images. It was a dark figure, black in silhouette, as if to contrast the walking sheet I'd just gotten rid of. I say the figures were only nearly identical because as my maddened owl's gaze was fixed in each direction, I noticed differences in speed and movement. The reflections at every end of every hallway within view were deviating from their clones as they approached me at the very center. The figure hovered above the stark white hospital floor, and as it levitated toward me, I could see what it truly was. A body bag, shredded from the knees down, wisps of plastic hanging in tatters. Neon yellow warning tape wrapped the vertical bag as if it had pressed its way through a cautionary web and became ensnared in the process. My hands moved from my ears to my eyes, letting the full blast of the alarm pierce my skull again. Blotting out the scene in front of me seemed much more important. Suddenly, silence. I knew what that moment of quiet meant, and I feared it more than the noise. The thing, the body bag, had reached its prey. It stood directly in front of me. It stood all around me. I felt as if I could have suffocated in the middle of their reeking, stifling bodies. I dropped my arms to my sides and let my head sink. There was nothing I could do. Nowhere I could run. Somewhere along the line I had passed from my own world into a parasitic twin dimension. Hell, I considered the idea that I might have suffered complications in surgery and that I was already dead. I opened my eyes, first staring balefully at the perfectly lit tiles under my feet, then raising my view to the thing in front of me. While I wasn't looking, the world had corrected itself, though the upright body bag still remained. "What do you want from me, man?" I whispered in a barely audible voice. There was only one now. One gleaming, dark form, its zippered face locked onto mine. Something spilled from beneath it. Something wet, gelatinous, and smelling of death. A single interwoven rope of entrails. The braided innards spasmed and twirled around each other, pulling themselves upwards into the air like the searching tentacle of a sea monster. I gagged at the sight, my heaving stomach wanting nothing more than to uncontrollably spill its contents. The disgusting, spaghetti-like appendage wound itself around my arm. Despite my protests, I couldn't pull away. My screams fell on deaf ears. I could feel the decayed flesh of the thing working its way under the cast, popping stitches, violating the fresh incision on my wrist. I don't know if there was some sort of shared thought as it tried to merge with my tissue, or if my thoughts had simply cleared in a moment of fight or flight panic. Either way, I now knew exactly what it wanted from me. The same thing it had tried to grab back in the hospital room. It needed my hand. It needed the fresh, working part added to its conglomeration of meat, and appendage that wasn't locked in place by rigor mortis. It wanted to open doors. Doors to other patients. Doors to other buildings. I shrieked again, pulling my arm away as hard as humanely possible and falling to the floor in the process. The ripping of skin and tensing of sinew was unbearable. As I rolled on the floor in pain, a primal feeling took over. I couldn't die there. I couldn't die like that. I couldn't suffer whatever it wanted to do to me next. Wrapping the tentacle around my free arm, I brought it to my face and bit in. I ripped the fetid, slimy guts with my back teeth, gnawing them apart with the growl of a rabid dog. Spurts of blood and bile commingled in my face. When I had freed myself, I awkwardly crawled backward on my hands and heels. Another strand of innards emerged from beneath the attacker. Then another. It swept toward me, through the air, appearing as if it was walking on 6 squid legs, then floating as a proper ghost should. I scrambled to my feet and ran as the sloppy, slick sound of organs on marble fell rapidly behind me. Dodging quickly into a room, I slammed the door shut behind me, and once again collapsed onto my back. This time, it was from relief instead of terror. Just outside, I could see the black plastic head and glinting zipper through a frosted glass window in the floor. A moist, slurping sound accompanied frustrated, fumbling half-turns of the doorknob. I spat a mixture of puke and bodily fluids at the floor. Then, I lifted my shaking hand, the hand it had tried to take from me, and I raised my middle finger. "This is all I'm giving you, bitch." I don't know exactly when or how I blacked out. There's a missing period of time between the enraged howl of the patchwork beast and the sound of nurses shouting at me. I awakened to a frenzied group of concerned faces as I was lifted from the place I had fallen and was placed back in my bed. I had spent the worst moments of my life with a ghost, a sheet ghost, no less. However, to the staff of the county hospital, nothing out of the ordinary happened. If you were to believe them, I rang for a nurse and she immediately came to my room, where I had lost consciousness after biting into my own wrist. Chalk it up to a bad reaction to the medication if you want, I guess. There's one problem with that story, though. When my loser friends came around to visit again, I told them all about the dream I had. They were equal parts grossed out and enthralled, especially Rat, the weird girl with a penchant for horror stories. It wasn't long after I told my tale that she chimed in with some unwelcome information. Apparently, there used to be a notable mortician on staff at that very hospital more than a decade ago. One who had a sick fascination with cutting out pieces of dead patients and doing God knows what with them. When he was caught lifting the liver of an organ donor, he was sentenced to a lengthy prison term. Newspapers labeled him the Morgue Man, and nearly 100 bodies were exhumed in an attempt to find some scope of his crimes. After everything came to light, the only time he was out of state custody was spent on a hospital bed due to a prison stabbing. He died soon after. That was likely to be the very same bed I had shared my room with. So yeah, maybe you still aren't afraid of sheet ghosts. They're just low-effort Halloween costumes and lazy creature designs. Right? Me? I never want to see one again. I hope you never see one at all.
I hope you enjoyed Sheet Ghost, as written by Christopher Slime Beast Wolf and performed by Jason Hill. Up next, we've got one final fearsome work of fiction from author J.M. Sinamo. In it, we'll meet Tommy and his parents, all of whom have just moved into their new home. After their basement is flooded in a terrible turn of events, however, they're plagued by what at first appears to be black mold. But as they're fated to find out, there is something far more terrible to the dark patches and their home than they could have ever suspected. Without further ado, I present to you Black Mold.
Tommy Illman was only 7 years old when his parents bought the house on Tamara Lane. Though it was no mansion by any stretch of the imagination, the 5-bedroom raised ranch-style home seemed like a palace compared to the 1-bedroom studio apartment he and his parents had lived in prior. His dad loved to brag about the size of the new house. He said that it even had a finished basement. "I thought the whole house was finished," Tommy said, confused by the term. His father laughed. "Yes, Tommy," he replied. "The whole house is finished. It just means the basement is set up to use as an activity room or a den or even bedrooms." Tommy gasped. "You mean I have to sleep in the basement?" This idea clearly upset him, and his protest continued until his mother interrupted. "Of course not, sweetie," she assured him in a low, soothing tone. "You can pick which room you want as yours." His eyes lit up. Before he had a chance to respond, he was cut off by his dad. "Except the master bedroom." Tommy let out a disapproving humph. He hated that his father always seemed to know what he was thinking. He figured that was just one of the perks of being a grown-up. As they stepped through the front door, Tommy squealed with delight. He dashed off through the living room, into the kitchen and down the main hall to look at the rooms. Though the size of the master bedroom was impressive, he was equally satisfied with the other 2 rooms on the main floor. He returned to the hall and pointed at a door that sat just off the kitchen. "What's that? Is it the basement?" His dad nodded. Tommy turned the knob and slowly opened the door. He was greeted by a wooden staircase that plunged downward into a dark, wide-open room. He turned to his parents. Fear painted across his innocent face. "It's okay, just turn on the light. The switch should be on the left wall. Show me your left." Tommy lifted his left hand slowly. His parents smiled and nodded encouragingly. He slowly slid his hand along the wall until he felt the switch. With a click, the light above the stairs came on, forcing the darkness to retreat. Tommy gave a weak smile, then carefully began to descend the stairs. The basement was much larger than he'd expected, and far less scary with the lights on. The main room was the length of the entire first floor, big enough to run around in or even play a game of tag. 2 bedrooms sat against one of the longer walls with a small half-bathroom between them. As Tommy marveled at the size of the basement, he was startled by loud footsteps on the stairs behind him. "I thought the basement was supposed to be finished," his mother said with disappointment in her voice. "The walls are just bare cinder block, and the floor isn't even carpeted." "Only the main room needs carpeting. The bedrooms are carpeted and the bathroom is ready to go. And I like the cinder block walls. Gives it a certain vibe," his father responded, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. His mother scoffed. "Yeah, like a dungeon." Tommy laughed. Sure, the concrete floor and gray cinder block walls weren't exactly homey, but the space definitely made up for it. Tommy peeked his head into one of the small rooms. "I like it down here," he said excitedly. "Can this be my room?" His parents looked at him with a mixture of confusion and shock. "Oh, come on," he pleaded. "This room can be my bedroom, and this room can be like a game room," Tommy explained, walking through the adjoining bathroom. "I'm a big boy now, and this way I can make noise and play video games and have friends over and practice karate and—" His parents started chuckling. His mother gave him a comforting smile. Okay. If you really like it, then I guess we can give it a shot. If you change your mind, we can always move you to an upstairs room." Tommy gave his mom and dad a big hug. "Hey," Tommy began as he looked toward the far corner of the main room. "What's that?" He pointed his tiny index finger at a large rebar grate in the floor. His dad walked over to it and peered inside. Looks like an old drainage grate. Bone dry in there now. Must have been used to drain water from the basement during construction before it was flood-proofed. Don't worry, though. Realtor said they sealed it up real good like a submarine. Tommy giggled. He loved submarines and boats. With a thumbs up, his dad reassured him this would be the best room in the house. That first winter was very trying for Tommy and his family. Repeated snowstorms brought over 5 feet of snow and temperatures that dipped well below zero. Of course, these conditions bothered his parents much more than they did him. Even though he couldn't play outside due to the winter advisory that was in effect, the schools were closed, and he got to stay in and play video games with his neighbor and new best friend, Ryan Fisher. He was slightly older than Tommy, and though the age difference was only by a couple of months, Ryan loved to rub it in Tommy's face. However, Tommy didn't pay attention to any of his teasing. In fact, he thought this behavior only showed that even though Ryan was older, he wasn't any more mature.
So, what made your parents buy a haunted house?
Ryan asked, never taking his eyes off the video game they were playing.
What do you mean haunted?
It's not haunted, Tommy protested, having lived in the supposedly haunted house for several months. Ryan shrugged, eyes still glued to the TV screen.
People say it's haunted. They say the last guy who lived here liked to lure kids down to the basement with candy. Then he would kill them and eat them. They say he killed himself when he heard the police were coming to get him and...
Boo! Ryan shouted and lunged at Tommy, causing him to let out a high-pitched yelp and drop his controller. He punched Ryan in the arm and began using words that would surely get him grounded if his mother heard him say them. That night at the dinner table, Tommy decided to break the usual silence with his newfound information.
Ryan says our house is haunted.
His parents stopped eating and waited for him to continue.
He says a bad man used to live here, and he ate kids in the basement.
Naturally, his parents were mortified at what the neighborhood kids said about their house.
Sweetie,
his mom said, placing a hand on his arm.
That's just a scary story the neighborhood kids made up to frighten you. The house isn't haunted, and no one that lived here ate people. Isn't that right, dear?
Tommy's dad nodded in agreement. That's right. The realtor said the house had been foreclosed after the original owner had passed away. Tommy gasped at the thought of someone dying here.
It's okay, T. The realtor said he was an old man, and it was just his time to go. Nothing to be scared of.
Tommy believed his parents, but still, he felt uneasy about the house, especially the basement.
Can I move my room to one of the upstairs rooms?
He asked with a hint of fright in his voice. His parents nodded and told him he could use the guest bed until they moved his things up from the basement. When spring came, the warm weather brought more than the usual birds, flowers, and insects. The enormous snow mounds that had built up over the previous winter had melted into a deluge of water, causing Tommy's entire street to flood. It was then that he and his family found out their finished basement would not live up to its title. One afternoon, as Tommy opened the basement door to get his skateboard and helmet, he found himself staring at several feet of water instead of the bottom of the staircase. The water was dark, smelled of mildew, and appeared thick and viscous.
Dad?
Tommy yelled down the hall.
The basement's flooded!
Tommy's dad came running down the hall. When he saw the swamp that sloshed lazily at the base of the stairs, he unleashed a tirade of swears and curses directed at no one in particular, save maybe the basement itself. Tommy's mom rushed in when she heard the yelling and told her son to go play outside, while they got the situation sorted out. He agreed and quickly hurried out to the yard to play, thankful he had moved his bedroom upstairs when he did. After several days of plumbers, home inspectors, and insurance agents coming and going, coupled with his father yelling at what he called the rat bastard realtor, the basement was finally water-free. The inspector told Tommy's parents the original seal had been a slapdash job, and the new seal should keep the water out for the coming years. Before he left, he cautioned they may experience some mold issues, but to give them a call, and they would send someone out to handle it. They thanked him and the rest of the workers for doing a quick job and hoped that would be the end of it. Not long after the flooding and repairs, Tommy was woken from a sound sleep by a faint scratching noise at his bedroom floor. He quickly snapped on his bedside light and looked all around his room. He was alone, but the scratching sound persisted. He slowly crept out of bed and placed his ear near the heating vent in his carpet. It was then that he realized it wasn't scratching he was hearing. It was whispering. "Tommy." The voice rasped like the sound of dry leaves scraping on pavement. "Tommy, please. Come down here. I want to meet you." Tommy was frozen with terror, but mustered all of his courage to respond. Who are you?" he asked, voice trembling. The whispering returned. "I'm a genie," the voice lied. "I was trapped down here until the water set me free. I have so wanted to meet you and your family. I've listened to you for months, hoping I would be set free so I could grant you wishes." Tommy grabbed his flashlight and made his way down the hall. He carefully approached the basement door. He reached out with his tiny hand, placed it on the knob, and slowly opened the door. As the hinges squealed and groaned, the batteries in his flashlight died. Tommy let out an audible yelp, then quickly cupped his free hand over his mouth. He peered into the inky blackness of the basement, too scared to descend the stairs, or even reach out for the light switch on the wall. In the darkness, he swore he saw a shape moving at the base of the stairs. As his eyes adjusted, the shape appeared to be a person, swaying back and forth, like a tree caught in a light breeze. Tommy swallowed hard as the shadowy figure lazily lolled from side to side. Then, the unthinkable happened. The shadow took a step. Tommy screamed as the figure moved slowly up to the next step, still swaying side to side. Without warning, the light above him flashed on, and the shadow vanished. "Tommy?" His dad's voice boomed from behind him. Tommy screamed and quickly turned to face him. "What are you doing out of bed, son?" Tommy was taking increasingly deep breaths. He raised his arm and pointed to the bottom of the stairs, not daring to turn and face what might still be lurking below. His father looked past him and gave an exasperated sigh. Tommy turned to see what was wrong and why he wasn't running in terror. On the wall, at the bottom of the stairs, was a large black stain. "Ah, great. Just what we needed." His father let out another sigh. "Mold. Come on, Tommy, get back to bed. We'll deal with this in the morning." As Tommy followed his father back down the hall, he glanced back, filled with dread. His father didn't see it, but he did. The mold wasn't only on the wall. There were 2 dark stains on the 2 most bottom stairs as well. The next day, Tommy told Ryan what had happened. "Oh, dude, you're full of crap," Ryan exclaimed. "That story I told you is something we all tell the new kid to scare them. There's no ghost or genie or whatever in your basement. The old dude that lived here just croaked. Don't be such a baby." "But it's true," Tommy argued back. "I can prove it." Tommy walked with Ryan over to the basement and swung the door open. "What do you call that?" Tommy asked, triumphantly pointing at the dark spot on the wall. Mold, you dingus. All the houses have it after the flooding." Tommy pointed his finger at the stairs. What about those footprints? Explain that," Tommy said, challenging his assertions. Ryan shook his head slowly. "Still just mold, dude." Tommy was starting to get angry. His parents hadn't believed his story either, and dismissed the shadowy creature as a nightmare. Ryan flicked on the overhead light and started down the stairs. "Come on, Tommy. Let's find this basement, Genie. Before Tommy could stop him, Ryan had already disappeared into the basement. Tommy quickly caught up to his friend, who was now standing in the far corner near the drainage grate. Ryan gestured at the floor surrounding it. Dark, greenish-black spots encircled the small opening in the surrounding walls. See, dude? Mold! It sucks, but it's just mold. Before Tommy could argue, the two of them were startled by a loud bang. The basement door had swung shut. Tommy ran back to the steps to see if maybe one of his parents had accidentally closed it, not knowing they were down there. But before the word "Mom" could escape his lips, the basement light blew with a sharp pop. Come on, Tommy. This isn't Ryan's words were cut short by a blood-curdling scream. Tommy squinted in the darkness, too frightened to move from the base of the steps. He stared at the far corner as unimaginable fear washed over him in waves. Even without the light, he could make out the horrible scene that was unfolding before him. The shadowy figure had returned and was wrapped around Ryan. Only this time, it looked far less human than the night before. Numerous limbs, claws, and tendrils groped, slapped, and squeezed his friend until the screaming stopped. Tommy saw the shadows lower his friend's limp body to the floor. Tommy, the shadows whispered. I'm still hungry, Tommy. The dark mass shambled toward him, twitching and chuckling. Will you feed me, Tommy? Will you bring me more food? Tommy began to sob. He knew that this was the end. He knew this creature would squeeze the life out of him like it did Ryan, and then it would get his parents. He closed his eyes and braced himself. What the hell are you kids doing down here? His father yelled from the stairs, flashlight in hand. Didn't I say it wasn't safe to be down here because of the... He didn't finish his sentence. Tommy's dad cupped a hand over his mouth as tears began to form in his eyes. Oh my God. Ryan. Tommy, what happened? What did you do? The shadows had retreated once again. Tommy ran to his father and wrapped his arms around him, hot tears stinging his eyes. It was the mold, Dad. It was the mold. The coroner's report had ruled Ryan's death an accident. They said it appeared he had suffocated from an intense allergic reaction from the mold spores in the Illman's basement. They said that situations like this were rare but not unheard of in young children. Ryan's parents, however, did not accept this explanation. Instead, they took their sadness and frustration out on Tommy and his family. This is all his fault! Ryan's mother screamed through tears, pointing an accusatory finger at Tommy. That little bastard did something to him! He's sick! Our whole family is sick! Mr. Fisher tried to calm his wife down, but the same pained, judgmental look lingered on his face. Honey, he began. Not here. Not like this. Ryan's closed casket sat just a few feet away on a small white altar, adorned with flowers, stuffed animals, and photos of the now deceased boy. Tommy hid behind his parents and burst into tears, his small voice trembling. It was the mold monster, Mrs. Fisher. Tommy struggled to get the words out. The sudden loss of his new best friend gripped him in fear and anxiety that would not shake loose. Mrs. Fisher approached the Illmans, hatred and pain in her eyes. The only monster is you! Get out! Out! With that, the funeral director approached the Ullmans and firmly asked them to leave. After Ryan's funeral, things only got worse for Tommy and his parents. The voices and shadows had stopped, but his fear of their return kept him awake most nights. One evening, when he should have been sleeping, he heard his parents arguing in the living room. Tommy's mother wanted to sell the house and move.
"We can't stay here," she pleaded. "The mold is dangerous and Tommy is terrified. His best friend died down there."
His father met her concerns with anger.
"We can't just leave. We sunk so much money into this goddamn house. Who's gonna want to buy it after a little boy just died here, huh? I had that shit in the basement cleaned best I could, and I filled the damn drainage grate with cement. What more do you want from me? What about our son?" she screamed. "Don't you give a shit about him? He won't sleep. He barely eats. He won't even go near the basement. He is traumatized."
Tommy's dad paced back and forth, hands covering his face.
Fine. Take him to therapy. Get some help. He's obviously all screwed up. I told him not to play in the damn basement. You do whatever you want, but I am not leaving."
His mother grabbed her coat and stormed down the hall to Tommy's room.
"Get up, sweetie," she said, lightly shaking Tommy's shoulder. "We're going to stay with Aunt Linda and Uncle Steve."
Tommy slipped on his shoes, took his mother's hand, and the two of them drove off into the night. Tommy didn't see much of his father after that fight. He and his mother stayed with his aunt and uncle until they were able to find an affordable townhouse. For the first few years after his parents separated, his father would come and visit a few times a year, but the constant bickering with his ex-wife made his visits less and less frequent. Until one day, they stopped altogether. Tommy attended therapy at the behest of his mother and school guidance counselor to help cope with what he had witnessed in the basement. After years of therapy, he eventually came to terms with Ryan's death being a freak accident caused by severe anaphylactic shock. True, he still had his fears of basements, sewer grates, and mold, but he tried not to let it interfere with his day-to-day life. The visions and voices all seemed to vanish the night he and his mother left the moldy old house. Now 18, Tommy had decided to leave the townhouse he and his mother called home for the past 11 years and rent his own small place in the city. His new apartment was barely bigger than the living room at the townhouse he'd just left, but it was closer to campus, and he could even walk to work if he had to. One evening, as he was just getting in from work, the weather took a terrible turn. Rain had been hammering down for hours, the gutters below Tommy's apartment filled with rushing water and debris. This type of weather always made him anxious. Thunder boomed just above, shaking his windows. He closed his eyes and tried to tell himself it was just a storm. As the noise from the growing storm raged on, his mantra was broken by the sound of his cell phone. The phone jingled to life with a number he did not recognize. Tommy nervously pressed the accept button. "Hello? Tommy speaking?" There was a pause. He heard someone on the other end breathing heavily. "Tommy, it's Dad. I know it's been a long time since we last spoke, but I heard you moved to your own place and were going to college, and I just wanted to see how you were." Tommy sat silent for what felt like an eternity. There were so many things he wanted to say to him, wanted to shout at him. He took a deep breath and closed his eyes. I'm fine, Dad, thanks. Been keeping busy, work, school, you know." He heard his dad chuckle on the other end. It had been so long since he had heard his father's laugh that he forgot how soothing it could be. "You sound so big now, T. I'm sorry I let time get away from me like that. I should have been there for you and I wasn't. I hope I can make it up to you, son. Anyway, I have some news you might like to hear. I know how much you hated that old house after your friend Ryan passed away. Well, I just heard from our old realtor that they tore it down to make way for condos or something like that. Isn't that great? Tommy felt his heart sink. Tore it down. Even the basement? Tommy asked, fear causing the hairs on the back of his neck to prickle. Yeah, even the basement. It's great, right? Before Tommy could respond, his living room light flickered and went out. The room filled with a wet and rotted odor as the vague shadows began to shift around him. "Dad?" Tommy nervously whispered into the receiver. "They let it out. They broke the cement in the grate and they let it out, Dad." His eyes darted around the room, phone still pressed to his ear. The silhouette seemed to dance and weave with every move he made. "Tommy, calm down, okay? We've been over this. There's nothing in that basement that can hurt." His father's words were cut short. He pulled the phone away from his ear. The screen was blank, dark, dead. Panicked, he bolted for the front door. "Tommy! Where are you going, Tommy?" The whispered voice of the shadows asked from just in front of his only means of escape. Something was different this time. This time, the shadows had more than one voice, speaking in unison. "Ryan? Ryan, is that you?" Tommy choked out between stunted breaths. "We're hungry again, Tommy. We haven't eaten in years. You're going to feed us, Tommy. You're going to feed us." The engulfing darkness slithered through the air, wrapping Tommy in their damp embrace. The stench of mold and decay filled his nose. The inky blackness wriggled and squirmed in and out of his mouth. The shadows blanketed his eyes and filled his ears until all fell dark and silent. Tommy's father came bursting to the front door of the small apartment. He knew he hadn't been the best dad, but he had to see what happened to his son when he heard the panic and fear in his voice. He needed to be sure that everything was going to be okay. But it wasn't okay. Nothing was okay. In the small beam of light that trickled into the apartment from the outside hall, he saw the lifeless form of what used to be his little boy sprawled on the floor. He rushed over and held his son's body in his arms. Silent, weak sobs escaped him as he rocked back and forth, trying to make sense of what could have happened since they last spoke 3 years ago. The door to the apartment slowly creaked shut, extinguishing what little light the hall had offered. A damp, moldy smell crept into the room. Tommy's father began to cough and choke with the noxious odors that now seemed to surround him. He raised his head and peeked over the shoulder of his son's corpse. On the other side of the room, the shadows bobbed and weaved from side to side. The squirming mass of darkness lolled toward him. "Dad, we're hungry."
I hope you enjoyed Black Mold, as written by J.M. Sinamo and performed by Jason Hill. I'd like to thank you personally for listening tonight. If you had as good a time as we did, please take a moment to subscribe and hit that bell notification icon here on YouTube to ensure you never miss a new release. And follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can also check out our podcast of the same name on iTunes and wherever else podcasts are found. and see our other quality programs at simplyscarypodcast.com. And please consider signing up as a patron at our website, chillingtalesfordarknights.com, to show your support and get all of our content, including our audio archive dating back to 2012, ad-free. Lastly, thanks again to today's sponsors, Astonishing Legends, for their support of the show. And remember, your support of their program helps ours out as well. Be sure to listen to the Astonishing Legends podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. There are links to our friends in the video description below. I'm your host, Steve Taylor, and it's been a pleasure, as always. I'm so glad you were able to join us tonight. Tune in again next time when we once again turn off the lights and turn on the dark. Sweet dreams, listener. Sweet dreams.